Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. My very special guest today is another member of the cabinet in the Moore-Miller administration, Secretary Portia Wu, Secretary of Labor. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Delighted to be here. Nice to see you, Senator.
Thank you, and you. So you have such an interesting and an impressive background. I'm going to run through it quickly, but I do want to spend most of our time talking about your current job. But you got your bachelor's at Yale, your master's at Cornell, then you went back to Yale for a law degree. You worked for Senator Ted Kennedy, which is where I started my political career, and Senator Tom Harkin, who I worked for 2 years on Capitol Hill. You were the vice president of the National Partnership for Women and Families. You were an Obama appointee, Domestic Policy Council, and then assistant secretary at the federal level. Then you went to work for Microsoft. So all of these really cool things, and I know that I left out a lot, but tell me, why don't you start with how your background prepared you for this job?
Well, thank you, Senator. I would say, a couple key things. First of all, I believe that having some real world experience really helps inform policymaking. So I actually started my career as a lawyer,
Right.
representing workers and labor unions, people who had lost their jobs, factories had closed, people were laid off. And I think that initial experience that helped me really understand when I started working in policy how legislation or agency policies have real world impacts. And frankly, they have to be practical. It's nice to have all kinds of ideas, but at the end of the day, it's employers and workers who have to understand the law and live it. And so I think that experience, both on the worker side and frankly on the corporate side, really helped me to understand it's one whole picture. You can't just look at it from one angle.
I love that. I love pragmatic backgrounds and pragmatic policymaking. Before we go to the Department of Labor, I am so curious to know about your experience at Microsoft. Were you a techie before they hired you? Did you become one? Are you like the smartest technology person in the office, kind of wherever you go now?
Senator, I have to confess, I'm really not a techie. In fact, when I got that job, my husband burst out laughing and said, "You never learned to program a VCR," for those of you who remember what those are. I admit, I sympathize. I don't know, when I get on, technology just seems to break all around me. So I sympathize with a lot of people who find it tough to navigate. But I actually thought it was great. So I was running the public policy team at Microsoft here in the DC area, doing federal policy and some state. And I actually think it was a strength to have that real world experience, like I just said, to understand for a lot of people, technology is sort of mysterious and not necessarily they think of as something that's friendly and accessible. So we need to think about that when we're talking about policies around tech.
So I think mysterious is one adjective. I think a lot of people find it scary or intimidating, actually. So yeah. So what was your proudest accomplishment at the Federal Department of Labor in the Obama administration? What did you accomplish that you really felt great about?
Say actually, there were a number of things when I was at Federal Department of Labor, I was at the White House too for a couple of years. But the thing I felt really good about actually is related to something we just did last week, which was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now for your listeners, was National Apprenticeship Week.
We are going to get to that, actually.
This was the 9th one, but we actually launched the first National Apprenticeship Week when I was leading the Employment and Training Administration at Federal Labor.
Nice.
And that was part of a whole initiative we had to say people have been thinking about apprenticeship in one way and more technical way, mostly with the skilled building trades, but actually it can be used in many industries and is a great way for people to get hands-on experience and recognize credentials in anything from insurance to cybersecurity to healthcare jobs, as well as in the skilled trades. And so we launched a whole marketing initiative, and that was 9 years ago. And that we were shooting for 100 events. We said, if we can do 100 events this year, will be a success. And I want to say they're up to the thousands now.
Nice.
So it's really been a success. And we had 30 events alone in Maryland last week. So it's terrific.
Fantastic. That's great. That's great. So one of the things that I love, as I have been kibitzing with all the cabinet secretaries, I want to know the process, the trajectory. How did you meet Wes Moore? Did you know him before as a candidate? What did you apply, or did you get a phone call? What was the process that led you to the job?
I got a phone call, and it's funny. I was very happy in my prior job at Microsoft. I really was enjoying it. And then I got a phone call, I want to say about a year ago. So last November,
Yep.
Obviously I'd paid it. I'm a Maryland resident. I'd paid close attention to the election. I was excited about Governor Moore's election. But I had really no thought of going in, and I got a call from his team, and I said, well, actually, I'm not sure you want me. At this time in federal government, sometimes if you're in the corporate world, progressive Democrats aren't necessarily that interested in having as many corporate people in government. Don't want to generalize, but that's definitely seeing a trend like that. And I said, I work at a company, and a company, right? And his team said, it doesn't matter. The governor wants to bring on people who have varied experience, and he thinks you'd be a good fit to at least come in. So I interviewed. I know they had a number of really talented, wonderful candidates. And then the first time I actually met the governor in person was when I interviewed with him.
Nice. And how did that go?
Someone told me something before that meeting, because I said, well, what is he like? How can I be prepared? And someone who had met him and spoken with him a number of times said, you will be very charmed by him.
No question.
That's true. But I have to say, after that meeting, I went back to that person and said, actually, no, I was very moved by him.
Oh.
And that's how I felt. I thought, I don't want to go back to the chaos of politics. It'd be a whole new job. It'd be really tough, whole new team. It'll be so hard. Got 3 kids at home. I don't want to do this. And then after that meeting, I thought, oh, well,
boom.
I guess I'm going to do it.
That's amazing.
If he asks me, that's where I'm going to be. The governor has that way about him. Where you lead, I will follow. That is definitely the way I feel about him.
I love it. That's fantastic. So you were nominated, you were approved by the Senate. And what did you inherit from the Hogan administration? What was the vacancy rate? What was the biggest challenge that you needed to address when you started?
I would say probably one of the biggest challenges was unemployment insurance. And that is still one of our biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone's familiar.
Oh, yeah.
The pandemic, unfortunately, it showed us there was a lot of fraud or attempted fraud. A lot of our systems don't work that well. A lot of people have been really frustrated and felt like we didn't do the best to respond to them. And so we're really trying to do better at getting those systems up to par, being more responsive, faster, everything.
Yes. And what was the vacancy rate?
Oh, I want to say we were over 10%, but actually the biggest issue in labor, the vacancy rate sort of masked something, which is we had lost about 300 headcount over the 8 years of the Hogan administration. So it wasn't just there were so many vacancies, we had lost, and this isn't an agency, we're now at about 1,300 people. We've been closer to 1,600. So losing those positions altogether it had really decimated some parts of the agency. We just weren't able to perform at the same level. And with pandemic, honestly, there was just so much focus on unemployment insurance. It was hard to pay attention to other parts of the department and our important work there.
Huge. Well, I want to give a shout out to personally to Abby Snyder, who handled my unemployment insurance claims for residents of Gaithersburg and Rockville, but also your people who were responsive to legislators when we contacted folks after they had been on hold for hours and hours and getting promises and no follow-up. When we contacted them, problems were solved and people weren't evicted or having their cars, repossessed and all that. It was a crisis. So anyway, thank you to the hardworking state employees who really helped. So labor is such a fascinating place to be now. So let's start with, it feels like there is just more labor organizing, more union organizing, more strikes. We just saw in Hollywood, that's been long, everything down to Starbucks. Why don't you talk about what it's like to be, working in labor issues today?
So you're absolutely right, Senator. It feels like sort of a pivotal moment. Actually, one of the last things I did at Microsoft before I came to the state was I helped to negotiate a neutrality agreement between Microsoft and the Communication Workers of America. So really the first of its kind with a large tech company like that. And that paved the way. And actually, some workers in Maryland have organized a unit who work for ZeniMax Gaming. So, first also, or one of the firsts in the gaming industry, again, an evolving industry. I think it's an important time. At Maryland Department of Labor, most of our labor work is not around collective bargaining and units. Obviously, much of that is governed by the Federal National Labor Relations Board. But I do think we see the importance of in a time of higher inflation, highly competitive economy too, there's both a desire on workers' part to make sure they're getting competitive wages and good benefits, but also there's a desire on the side of employers to say, how can I get the talent I need? Or
Right.
I'm having trouble getting people with the right skills. What can I do to help people get the skills to help my business succeed? So it's actually a very interesting time. Especially Maryland still has the lowest unemployment rate in the country.
That is literally my next question. So
Okay, I'll pause then.
So I heard a story on NPR that just bragged about Maryland having the lowest unemployment rate in the country, 1.7%, and 43,900 more jobs were created in Maryland, existed in Maryland in the end of October of 2023 than existed in October of 2022. So that's fabulous. North Dakota is number 2, which is pretty random, but that also does mean challenges because it's harder to hire. It's harder to get folks to stay in jobs because they know that it's kind of a seller's market. Why don't you talk about both sides of that, if you want to add?
Absolutely. Well, in some ways it's a great opportunity because it means that employers are willing to consider candidates they might otherwise not have considered.
Yes.
And so, especially with the more Miller administration priority of leaving no one behind, it means we can say, okay, maybe they don't have a 4-year college degree. And Governor Moore talks about this a lot, but maybe they have some college or some other really important, relevant experience. Can you look beyond the degree and see, is this someone who can fit in the job or someone I could train to have the right skills?
Yes.
I think it's a great opportunity. It does also mean, though, I do want to know the unemployment rate only counts people who are looking for a job.
Right.
And we do have people who either maybe because they have prior justice involvement or other serious barriers in their past, who maybe have given up or COVID. Honestly, a lot of people left the workforce during the pandemic.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we're very intentional about encouraging those individuals to come back out and to, fill jobs, get the training they need to get refreshed. And that's a challenge. It means people who aren't in right now have maybe some of the greatest challenges. So we need to work extra hard as a state and with our partners and nonprofit, local government, everywhere to make sure we are reaching those individuals.
Terrific. I was going to reference returning citizens, people who have served their time in the justice system, and you just beat me to that too. So let's talk about teleworking and the impact of COVID. How do you see that trajectory going in the next year or two?
Gosh, I think if there's one thing that COVID taught us, we sort of don't know what's going to happen year to year. The world of work looks just very different each year.
Yeah.
I do think we're seeing a lot more individuals returning to work. And I want to note, first of all, for, the majority of workers didn't have a choice about working in person or remotely anyway. Many service sector workers, building trades, drivers, like healthcare workers, many people have jobs that need to be done in person, and that has not changed or stopped.
Right.
But for those, perhaps some office workers, we are definitely seeing return to work. I would say maybe some form of hybrid work may be here to stay. It's hard to know. I definitely hear, as you're probably hearing, especially among younger people, they really value that hybrid work environment or the chance to telework.
Yep.
At the same, in the state and in our department, we've gone to sort of a hybrid approach as well. And that's a strong recruiting tool, saves our commuting time. That's good for the environment as well. At the same time, there's a lot to be gained by people being in person, right? I'm in the office almost every day. And, especially as a newbie to
Yeah,
state government, like there's a
sure.
lot I need to learn. And for someone like me who needs to learn new people, new systems, it's actually really valuable to be in person.
That's great. That's great. So I want to ask about three areas that I think you work across departments. And the Moore Miller administration's cabinet is just chock full of superstars. You guys are all unbelievable. And every time I chat with one of you, like you're cooler than the one before. You're just all fabulous. So I'm going to start with the one that I'm very connected to is the SERV Act, the Department of Service and Civic Innovation. So giving primarily young people an option to have an internship, an apprenticeship. I'm dropping the word.
A service year?
Yeah, the gap year, the service year option. How are you going to think about at the other end after they're done with their service? Are you going to be partnering with Secretary Montero and that program to figure out how we can get them to stay in Maryland, to bring all those experiences, skills, and passions and keep them here in Maryland?
Absolutely. I have to say, since this is one of those building the plane while flying it moments.
Yes.
We haven't figured out all the answers yet, but absolutely. And Secretary Montero reached out right away before he even had a team. I think he was a 3-person team when he reached out, just getting started, saying, one, it's a great opportunity to recruit because our workforce system, the American Job Centers, they serve youth in our communities as well. And so connecting them with service year opportunities was important. But also thinking about exactly as you said, Senator, we want to make sure that people have a valuable year, but also at the end of it can say, I have either these recognized credentials or this really specific set of work experiences that I can hold up to a future employer and say, look, this is how I've contributed. So we absolutely want to make it. And we're thinking about how we weave apprenticeship with it, as you said.
Right.
Because we want students to feel like it's not just a thing you did for a year, but it's a bridge to other future opportunities.
Yep, absolutely. Second question on interdepartmental, Secretary McElwain and the Department of the Environment. Talk, if you would, about how you're thinking about green jobs and the green economy.
Absolutely. Well, it's clear that, the clean energy and the green sector are areas of growth, not only for Maryland, but across our country. Maryland Department of Labor was fortunate enough to pull together a bunch of stakeholders around offshore wind. And we got over $20 million in a grant that I give credit to the last administration's team. They actually did this at the end of the last administration, did this work to make sure that we could invest that money in growing a workforce for offshore wind. We're seeing other similar opportunities in, for example, EV charging infrastructure. That's going to be really
electric
important. Electric vehicles, sorry.
Okay.
Wastewater management.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is important for state and local, and not only state government, but local government as well, and local utilities. So we think that having these skills, and nowadays, all of that stuff needs technology.
Yes.
So understanding the technology part, the cybersecurity part of, clean electric grid or modernized wastewater systems, all that's going to be important. So we think that's a great opportunity to get individuals those skills, and that will help protect our environment and keep our economy competitive.
Absolutely. Third one, I passed and the governor signed a licensure bill to allow that people that we have educated who want to be healthcare workers, when Maryland is ranked 50th, the longest emergency room wait times, so that we can get people in jobs, get them licensed so that they can be doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, but home healthcare workers, all of that. How are you helping to get the word out about this new opportunity? Is that something you guys have focused on yet? Because it just became law last month.
Actually, I think we have a call with Secretary Herrera's team maybe tomorrow, if not this afternoon. She has certainly rung the alarm bell with us, saying we have this terrible shortage in the care workforce. And frankly, Senator, I understand it. My brother and my sister-in-law both live in the area. And my brother used to work for Kaiser here in DC and in Maryland. And he actually ended up leaving private sector practice. He was a psychiatrist. And like a lot of healthcare workers, especially ones who were dealing with mental health issues during the pandemic. It got so bad at the end that he ended up leaving and going to work for FDA. So there's a lot of burnout among healthcare workers. It's a very stressful time, and we need to find other ways to continue to grow that workforce pipeline.
Sure, but the opportunity to include immigrants, people who are not yet citizens, is really important, and that's the new law that just went into effect October 1st. So,
oh yes, and I'm sorry on that part in particular. We actually in the Department of Labor, it's small but a mighty team of individuals who it's an Office of New Americans. So thinking about how we create, and I believe we've already started charting with Department of Health some of those pathways and guidance for foreign licensed professionals to transition over. Absolutely, that's a critical piece.
It's huge, and it can be part of our solution, I think, to the wait times and the shortages and the stress, reducing the burden on others. Is there anything more you want to say about apprenticeship? Because that was the next thing, partnership with the Department of Education. Senator Rosapep would be very disappointed if I didn't give you another opportunity to talk about that briefly.
Well, Senator, I'm passionate about it too, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think the youth apprenticeship angle is really important, right? The blueprint from Maryland's future says by 2030, we're going to have 45% of high schoolers getting a high school apprenticeship or some other industry recognized credential. We're at only single digits now. Now, I will say the number of school apprentices, young youth apprentices, I think we were at 11, maybe 6 years ago. We were at 500 last year. We're at 700 in this school year. So the school districts are really all in now. And we have agreements with all 24 county school districts now to advance apprenticeship. So that ball is, we're picking up that momentum and speed. Super excited to see what we can do about that in the coming year.
Very cool. Very cool. So the biggest, most exciting among all other exciting things is the fact that the FBI is going to come to Maryland, which is jobs and prestige and all of the things. So do you want to talk about that? Say, were you involved in that process, and what's the next step that we should be aware of?
I was not personally involved in the process, but that doesn't mean I didn't fire off a whole bunch of emails with many exclamation points. The second we're all very excited, and anyone on the governor's team has been known how immersed he was in this, and the whole federal delegation, and advocating very strong for Maryland. So super excited. I think, though, it just shows there are all these infrastructure investments coming in Maryland of all kinds, secure buildings, roads, bridges, tunnels. Just did a bunch of announcements with the governor on it last week. It means we've got to have that skilled workforce there. Because the buildings have to be built. If Marylanders aren't trained and ready for the jobs, contractors will bring in people from out of state. So we want to make sure our local workforce has those skills and capabilities, is ready to go.
So thrilled. I have to say, I was down at the March for Israel, and on my way back to the Metro, I passed by the FBI building, and I couldn't help. Not only did I take a picture of the seal, but I said, "Welcome to Maryland, welcome to Maryland." So is there anything we haven't talked about that's a priority of yours, Secretary Wu, that you want to mention before we go to our Fast Five?
I think, yes, here's a big one: paid family and medical leave.
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, that little thing. So Maryland, of course, passed that. Thank you, Senator, for getting that passed into law before we started in the Miller administration. But there's a lot to do, and we delayed the deadline slightly last year because when we started, we realized the infrastructure hadn't yet been set up. It's a big challenge, right? That's something that's going to apply to all businesses in the state, all employers. Self-employed individuals will have a chance to buy in. And we've seen when other states have paid family and a medical leave to care for themselves or a seriously ill family member or for a new child, it really actually helps. It not only helps families, but it helps keep people attached to work. And I think that's something that sometimes people don't think about. That's really can be a benefit for businesses. And in Maryland, small businesses under 15 employees don't have to make the business side contribution. So it's subsidized for small businesses as well, which is really important. I think it can be a great system, advance our competitiveness, and also make sure people can care for their loved ones or themselves in a time of serious crisis. But there's a lot of work to get the government system stood up. And that's what we're working on for the next year or two. We will be heads down working super hard on that.
Absolutely. Do you want to speak briefly about minimum wage?
Absolutely. That was it was terrific to see the governor's legislation pass. Thank you for all the support in the assembly to accelerate the minimum wage to
Yes.
$50 an hour. I think that was incredibly
You
important.
cut off just a little. I just want to make sure people hear that it was 15. It's almost sounded like $50 an hour. So I don't want anyone watching this to have a coronary that you just said 50. 15.
15, that's
Yes.
correct. And we accelerated that, which I think really made sense given what we had seen in the economy with sort of a faster pace of inflation. Hopefully that's leveled out. But I think we're also seeing, it's not an accident that some counties have a higher minimum wage even than that, because there are a lot of costs that working families need to meet. And frankly, a lot of employers are already increasing wages because with the tight labor market, they know that's what they need to do to attract talent.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Secretary of Labor, Portia Wu, such a treat to talk to you. And it is time for the Fast Five. Five quick questions with five quick answers to let folks get to know you a little better. So question number one, tell us who a hero or shero of yours is and why.
I would say actually one of my earliest heroes. Oh no, actually I'm going to say my grandmother. Actually, she was my shero. She super quick. She was widowed at a young age. She had 5 young children, all girls. She went back to school. She got her pharmacy tech degree and started working. She hadn't worked since high school, and she raised all 5 girls herself. They all became medical professionals, and she lived to be 99. She was an amazing woman. She totally was. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Think at 99, that's amazing. I think it would be appropriate to recognize that we just lost First Lady Rosalind Carter. And she was quite an extraordinary to many and role model to so many of us. Question number two, what is the favorite concert you've ever attended?
Oh gosh. This was a fun one. I'm not sure it was a favorite, but it was very memorable. Actually, I went to hear Billy Joel in Syracuse. Syracuse. I'm from upstate New York.
Yes.
So in what's the name of their stadium? Like the Orange Bowl, the giant football stadium in Syracuse, New York, and it was outdoors, and it was a fabulous, fabulous concert. I'm dating myself because those of you who know when performing, I want to say that was the early 90s,
Nice.
but that was a lot of fun. I went with a whole bunch of friends from school. That was really a good time.
Awesome. Awesome. Question number three, what is the favorite? You've got 3 kids and a spouse, and what was your favorite family vacation? Where'd you go?
I would say it was speaking of Taiwan, and this also explains why it's been so long since I've been to a concert, because I have these 3 kids. We did a family heritage trip to Taiwan.
Love that.
And that's where my parents immigrated from. And my third wasn't even born yet. We took the 2 younger ones. They were only 4 years old, so you can't travel with young kids.
Right.
And we went to visit, some of our, where my father had grown up, the small village where he grew up, and the middle school that his dad started, a career in technical education middle school, actually. Just a lot of places. And my husband had never been. He's, not Chinese by heritage. And we brought my mother-in-law too. So it was fun to blend our families and sort of share pieces of our cultural heritage. That's probably my favorite.
That's totally great. Question number 4. We are taping this at Thanksgiving week, and I wonder if you can tell us something that you are thankful for.
So I was saying to my team, the labor team, this year I'm trying to focus on the blessing, more on the blessing and less on the stressing. That's my mantra right now. And I feel, even though being at the state, I feel this, I'm thankful for this opportunity to serve the people of Maryland. It is a little bit stressful to think about all the things that aren't working, unemployment insurance, all these things that need to be better.
Yes.
We actually don't have working heat in our building yet. It's almost back online at the department, but I don't want to focus on that. Let's think about the blessing, and the blessing is being with some wonderful colleagues here at the state, having this moment and being able to serve and start a new chapter. I'm in my 50s. You don't always get to do that, to go on a new adventure.
Right.
this time in your life. And I feel really lucky to be able to do that.
I love that answer. Good job. Question number 5. The question I ask all of my guests. Secretary Portia Wu, Department of Labor. What is your hidden secret superpower? What's a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I don't know if most folks can't do this, but one of my random superpowers is I'm really good at voice recognition. Yes, yes. I'm one of those people. It's gotten less good as I age, but back when we used to have a landline, right?
Sure.
I pick up if someone say hello, like I usually knew who the person was
Wow.
from just one word. Yeah, yeah.
So
A
does that
random
work for you with
superpower.
music? Like, can you, if a radio's on, do you know who the band is or the singer is?
Well, do you remember that old show, Name That Tune?
Yeah.
Like I used to love that show when I was a kid because I get the okay. Nowadays, I have to admit I haven't listened to all of Taylor Swift's oeuvre and all these things. I'm a little behind, but I used to be pretty good at that too.
That's very cool. That's a really good superpower. I like it. I like it. Well, Secretary Wu, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all you have done and will do. And thank you for your willingness to come into state government and serve. We are lucky to have you. And thank you for kibitzing with me today.
Well, thank you, Senator. This was really a treat. I didn't get to hear any of your puns. I know you're famous for your sort of puns and sense of humor, so I'll have to hold you to that next time. But thank you for having me. Love the conversation.
I would say I'll work on that. All right. Take care. Stay well. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.